Good morning. Happy to see you guys, and happy Bill's back safely, but in the audience, not up here with me. Yeah. Welcome, and I'll start the way we always do, which is to say that no matter who you are or where you are on your spiritual journey, you are celebrated here. And I'm going to pick up where Bill left off a couple of weeks ago. I have for however many years, 27 years. I acted like I didn't know exactly how long I've been coming to this class. Taken notes every Sunday, and one of the things I wrote down the last time Bill spoke was, how do we become bright, bold, ordinary mystics, which was his challenge to us that last Sunday. Granted, we've only been given a month to figure this out. So we're going to show them that we're quick studies, and I'm going to give you kind of a how-to manual about how to become bright, bold, ordinary mystics. He brought in the image of the cosmic egg, often attributed to Richard Rohr, but I think it's kind of a collective image to illustrate the concept of spiritual growth. And in order to understand what it means to become a bright, bold, ordinary mystic, we have to be open to the fact that my story, who I am, is also embedded in a larger story, the story. This realization that we're part of a greater whole. It's not a move from bottom to top, it's not hierarchical, it's not a ladder, but it's an integration of sorts from the inside out. I think it was Walt Whitman who said, "I contain multitudes." And it's true. Each of us is like an onion. We're made of multiple layers that come in and out of focus at different times. Sometimes we might be working on an outer layer, sometimes on a really deep inner layer. Rumi said that the bird song begins inside the egg. And just like us, our sense of self deepens as it recognizes its place in that cosmic story. We begin inside of that. A lot of what I'm teaching today is based on 3 sources. Thanks to Bill's mentioning books every now and then. I pick up a few. One of the books I have loved is Dorothy Soley's Essential Writings and her book, The Silent Cry, both about the integration of mysticism and activism. How do we enfold our faith around our work in the world? And the third one is Christianity's Dangerous Memory by Diarmuid O'Miraku. I'll start with some definitions of mysticism. William James was considered the first American psychologist, and he has a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience. It's what every philosopher and or psychologist must read. And he took a really individual view of mysticism. His ideas centered around profound peak experiences, one-off events that change an individual. These experiences are characterized, in his words, by ineffability. This is one of my favorite words. If something is ineffable, it's hard to talk about. It lacks words. A noetic quality, so at the same time it has a head quality, an understanding, something you can try to academically or intellectually understand. Transient, so it's short-lived. And passivity, it happens to you. He thought of an individual's mystical experience as the core of religion, and he thought it was superior to institutionalized religion, that this was really the way into faith of any kind. He's not wrong that the experience of religion is often more profound than what we might experience in church, like just doing the ritual. We can have peak experiences in that environment. But I think what James got wrong, and this is bold to say William James got something wrong, is that mysticism is not just an individual experience. It can also be participatory and communal. So for some, turning to God means turning away from the world, going out. This is when that out there God drives faith, the one who stirs the cosmic soup, an escape hatch from reality maybe. But Dorothy Soley suggests that turning to God means turning our capacity to love toward the world, showing up in the world. to fulfill the dangerous dream of the beloved community. In this dream, there's no personal Jesus. There's no isolated from the world God, but a premise that unity is actually at the heart of reality and that we're all part of it. She advocates for a more relational, experiential, and politically engaged understanding of mysticism that emphasizes God's presence here in the world through love and resistance. So many writings on mysticism are actually through the lens of the male voice, mostly because over time, men were educated in formal settings and women were not. Therefore, it's often the case that males who are writing about mysticism tend to draw from traditional language and interpret these experiences with formal and abstract words, whereas females tend to write from a more emotional and sensory place. Neither is better or worse than the other. They're both important to our complete understanding. I just want to note the differences because it helps me understand why Dorothy Soleil is coming into this work with a more embodied and activist approach. She says that mysticism is something we practice, not an event that happens to us. She emphasizes that this is a hard word to say, democratization of mysticism, meaning that mystical experiences and the potential for spiritual transformation are available to everyone, not just scholars, not just those who study enough or pray enough, not the holy ones who go off in the mountains. They're available to everyone. She believed that these sensibilities could be cultivated through practice. And this vibrant and relevant faith exists in the modern world. Practicing it centers around three basic steps: cultivating awe, letting go, I promise you'll get a slide for this, and resistance to injustice. For Soleil, the mysticism is that silent cry at the heart of authentic spirituality and deeply connected to our relationship to social justice and political action. Practicing mysticism, then, does not so much remove us from ordinary life as it does embed us in it. She explicitly challenges the patriarchal nature of most religion, but she also criticizes the feminist approaches that simply replace God's pronouns, moving from father to mother, God to goddess, or he to she. At that point, we're just flipping power. We're not actually transforming anything. And the move is actually a much deeper one, asking us to become co-creators of a life led by justice and care regardless of gender. A really brief side note about God's gender. I read a New York Times op-ed some years ago about the Hebrew name for God, commonly pronounced Yahweh. Written, it's actually a four-letter tetragrammaton, YHWH. An Israelite priest would have read it in reverse because Hebrew is read right to left instead of left to right. So it would have actually been pronounced something like hu he, which actually means he, she. So the God of our tradition was understood by its earliest worshipers and scholars as a non-binary, multi-gender deity. At the head of our tradition is a both and God. That's so cool to me. Soleil challenges our practice of Christolatry, or idolizing of Christ. She says worshiping Jesus is not the point of Christianity, despite what the creeds say, whosoever shall believeth in him. That's belief in something. She reiterates that the point is to become Christ, all of us. Two of my favorite things attributed to Jesus are two words each. One, Jesus wept, and two, follow me. It seems like Jesus knew how hard this human gig is, that having a body is difficult. It's hard to get old. Being human makes us weep. It makes us cry and feel tremendous pain at times. The follow me part is not so much about belief and actually looking after someone, but it's about taking action, being led, and also leading at times. Christianity is less about believing something about the sacred than it is about believing that the sacred is in everything. The kind of compassion that moves us to weep and seeks out companionship is born out of our wounds. And from those wounds, we have the potential to develop the empathy necessary to heal ourselves and the world. Jung called this the wounded healer archetype. It's based on the myth of Chiron in ancient Greek. Mystical experiences can be heart-wrenching and difficult. And when we're embedded in it, we are moved beyond the self and pulled towards resistance of some kind in a way that serves the larger good, not just our ideas about needing to be good. You see the difference? One is not about praise and affirmation. It's just about doing good, doing the next right thing. Many of us have seen images of starving families in Gaza. They're gut-wrenching. How skinny these children have gotten because food can't find its way in. One answer to this has been World Central Kitchen. It's an organization that has witnessed and responded to such suffering. Professional chef Jose Andres started this mobile kitchen in Haiti following the 2010 earthquake. If you remember, feels like ages ago now. There have been so many disasters since. And in camps, he cooks alongside families, often cooking their native foods, what they customarily eat. And he talks and listens to them about their traditions. He serves them hot meals, not just freeze-dried, air-dropped meals. Since then, he's brought the alchemy of the kitchen and the dignity of a home-cooked meal to unthinkable places, including Gaza, Ukraine, Puerto Rico after Maria, and most recently to Texas after the floods. He goes where he's needed. He's practicing mysticism in a way that goes beyond the individual. He's literally feeding the global community. And while Dorothy Solé acknowledges the importance of individual mystical experiences, she also emphasized the communal and social dimensions of it. She encourages us to think about mystical experiences as leading to a greater sense of responsibility to and for one another, to relate it to our action within the world, not just personal transformation. That's the biggest difference between William James's definition of mysticism and Dorothy Solé's. William James focuses on individual transformation. She focuses on world transformation. That our individual transformation ought to feed the other and vice versa. So laid out, the practices of mysticism are less like progressive stages and more like interlocking circles in my mind, like a mandala. The mandala, if you know, is a sacred symbol that represents wholeness and balance. Actually, a really wonderful spiritual practice that I don't do every day, but that I do sometimes, is if you're a coffee drinker or tea drinker in the morning, to take your coffee cup, trace a circle around it, and draw a mandala. This is mine. It is imperfect, it's coffee stained, it's on a list that I'm making for my day, but it's there. It does not need to be perfect. These Tibetan monks who take weeks, sometimes months, to make mandalas, grain, is that a fuzzy picture? It is a little fuzzy. Grain by grain of sand. They get blown away in the end, swept up. The point is the process, not perfection, and not the outcome. So I'm going to go back to these circles of practicing mysticism, and I'm going to start with awe. What does awe require of us? It requires humility and the ability to appreciate beyond our own experience. It looks like taking time to notice beauty, art, architecture, music, nature. Go on walks. I love when I travel to just go on walks wherever I am, no matter where I am. Not too long ago, it was at an airport hotel in Milan, and I went on a walk, and I saw native birds right there. Second is to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. This requires us to cultivate curiosity and be present. Yesterday, in my backyard, I watched two presumably male green anoles flex. You know the green lizards? And they're actually becoming rarer and rarer in Houston because these other brown lizards have been imported, they think, in boxes from the other side of the world through Amazon. Yeah. And these lizards are eating our green animals, okay? So to see a green animal now is a little amazing. But I watched two of them. They were changing color really slowly, and they were pushing their little dewlaps out at each other. And they were like, oh, I can do more push-ups than you. They were doing, male lizards do push-ups. And it's how they show the other that they're strong. I think there's a thing with dudes across species, maybe? I don't know. My son, when he's challenging my youngest, challenging me, he's, Mommy, how many push-ups can you do? I can still do more than him, but not for long. I'm like, is this really a dude thing? We do push-ups? I guess it is. The third thing is to engage your senses. To close your eyes from time to time, to tune your body into a space. This could be, for me, it's on my screen porch with a cup of coffee at sunrise because my dogs tend to want to get up then. Or the Grand Canyon, someplace magnificent where the awe is all around us. The last couple of mornings while letting my dogs out, before the noise of lawnmowers, leaf blowers, cars starting, garages opening, I've been treated to what I am positive are the same 3 birds of prey. I think they're juvenile hawks. Maybe one of you will know when you hear it. But they're perched in my neighbor's tree, just chatting with each other. Let's see if that'll... Nope. Maybe not. Okay. They are making this incredible noise with each other that they're just calling. They're just talking. They're just practicing. I hear birding is something we just automatically get into when we turn 50. Is that true? Yeah? Okay. Something in us is I need birds all of a sudden. I don't know. It's happening. I'll tell you what, I even have binoculars. And I'm not so great yet at identifying all the species. I think this is a red-shouldered hawk. If you could hear it, I know one of you in here who is over 50 could tell me. If you were here for Nadia Bolz-Weber's talk, she spoke of the impact of bird sounds on our nervous system, how much they lower stress, how listening to them can reduce anxiety, depression, and improve mood and cognitive function, because this is why birds only call when they're at ease. They do make hunting sounds, they do make squawking sounds, but in the mornings it's like roll call. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, right? It's also so the hawks can identify which one of you am I gonna eat, but there we go. Everyone names their position as the day begins. They tend to get quiet when they detect danger. So when we hear them, our bodies also know there's no danger here. I've been gifted by these calls each morning, this little conversation. I'm going to give you guys a quick and easy way that you can engage your senses, just no matter where you are, if you find yourself feeling a little unmoored. And it's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. So the first thing is 5 things you can see. It's a way to ground in a space. 4 things you can hear. 3 things you can touch. 2 things you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste. Sometimes there's nothing readily available to taste, so it might just be whatever you had for breakfast in your mouth or what's on your finger, I don't know. Please don't pick your noses. So we disengage each sense. Personally, I don't think it matters if you change up the numbers, because sometimes you are surrounded by a buffet and there might be 5 things you want to taste, right? Or if you change up the order, the point is just to get in touch with your senses and to interrupt negative or anxious thought patterns. Plus, learning to inhabit our bodies is a way to connect with the deliciousness of being alive on this planet. It's an incredible place. A UC Berkeley psychology professor, Dacher Keltner, I had never heard of him until I Googled ways to cultivate awe. He has a book on it, apparently, so look him up. So he writes that the 8 pathways to awe are practicing moral beauty, acts of kindness and courage, be in nature, collective movement. He used, y'all get this, sports as an example. Turns out I've been doing it right all along when I go to baseball games, okay? In my head, I have at least 3 chapters written on the spirituality of baseball, but I haven't yet gotten it out. Listening to music. My favorite is putting on Pablo Casal's Bach's cello suites on my record player. Something about a record is a lot different than it pumping out over the digital speakers in our house. And sometimes I'll just lay on the floor and listen to it, and it never ceases to make me cry. Appreciating visual art, being open to our own big ideas, engaging with mystery, and have a daily spiritual practice. The second step to practicing mysticism is letting go. In letting go, we have to let go of the ego's desire to control. And I want to explain what I mean here. I really resist any pop psychology or new age spirituality that's like, death to the ego. I spend a lot of time correcting this with clients I work with who want to bypass the ego altogether and jump straight into transcendence. We need our ego. In fact, the developmental task of childhood is to develop ego strength. It serves as our administrator. It helps us accomplish tasks, to pay the bills, to stop at stoplights, get the groceries. When the world is falling apart, you still have to make sandwiches. It's vital to our daily functioning. The ego helps us align with the virtues of the self and make decisions accordingly. It helps us catalog and pursue moments of awe. It helps us create poetry and art. What I mean when I say let go of the ego is this: don't let it defend you from connection, humility, and awe. Don't let it convince you that you're never wrong. Don't let it make you afraid of huge, life-changing emotions like grief and love and wonder. When the ego is in control, rather than our partner, we miss these more subtle and infinitely more compassionate messages of the self. The ego protects us from uncertainty, which is helpful when we are performing daily tasks or taking a test, but not helpful when uncertainty might help us grow. The second in letting go is letting go of ideas about individual freedom and security. My son's equine therapist is fond of saying, what's good for one is good for none. And we live in a state whose pride is expressed with slogans like, don't tread on me. We focus a lot on individual rights in this state, the right to bear arms, to protect our personal property and sense of security. But simply put, good power is shared power. Collective freedom is about every person's right to be themselves in community without fear of judgment or suppression. And safety is proactive, whereas security is reactive. Okay? The third is letting go of our misguided ideas about the other. In her book, The Touch of Transcendence, Myra Rivera contemplates the nearness of God, and she concludes that God is not within human grasp, but is always within human touch. Not within human grasp, but always within human touch, right next to us. Transcendence is a relationship, not a state. When we can touch one another physically and emotionally, we touch God. That's such a beautiful idea to me. And it's really difficult to apply at times when we start othering each other, when we start convincing ourselves that someone is at fault, that someone is wrong, that someone did something to us. Just before she died, Toni Morrison attempted to answer this question: why do we other? In her very short book, The Origin of Others. She writes, the danger of sympathizing with the stranger is the possibility of becoming the stranger. There are no strangers. There are only versions of ourselves, many of which we have not embraced, most of which we wish to protect ourselves from. So being willing to encounter the strange other in ourselves, letting go of our idea about the other references the practice of awe. When we can see each other as sacred, we can be in awe every moment. For me, this has come through the daily practice of working with my dreams. Unfettered and unself-conscious, if any of you follow your dreams, it's capable of producing exhilarating and terrifying images. One read on the relationship, for example, between Judas and Jesus by Jungian scholar Edward Edinger is that Judas was not a real person. but a shadow archetype, a dream image. One of Jesus' last acts, then, was to take Judas's face in his hands and receive his kiss, to welcome the shadow, to take in the shadow. Only then could he be transformed. Letting go does not always happen willingly. Sometimes we're beaten into submission, forced to let go. You knew it was coming, but here's my mention of Jacob wrestling the angel. This is like Bill mentioning books. I talk about Jacob and the angel at every chance I get. Jacob does not want to let go. He would have kept wrestling. The angel has to whack him with a stick or a staff and pry Jacob from his celestial body. I think it's true, especially as a mother, that if you love someone fiercely, you really, really want to hold on. I think of parents who have gone through illness or substance abuse or behavioral challenges with their kids. We tend to be the kind who wrestle it to the ground, who think maybe if I just did this or said that, if I hadn't done this or said that we can beat back the pain with love and in some cases guilt. Mothers are indeed some of the most strong and stubborn creatures I have ever met. So yeah, letting go is hard. I'd like to put a little asterisk and say mothers are excused from this. But alas, I too must recognize my limitations. So I guess the question I'd leave us with about letting go is, how do we do this gracefully without withholding love? If any of you have the answer, you're next week's speaker. Okay? And that I'm spending so much time on this particular topic, on letting go, should tell you that it's probably the hardest circle. I love fixing things. Like I love tools. I have a whole garage bay full of power tools and hand tools and inherited tools from my grandfather and my father. They were both engineers. So people who know me and who have traveled with me have heard me say, I need to start traveling with my toolkit. Because if I notice like a little foot on the chair is loose, I'm like, oh, I can fix that. It's a problem. So to the point that these people tend to give me multi-tools, not usually very good ones. My mother just gave me one that I have thrown away. Drill bits that curve around corners. It's this really cool drill bit when you can't get around something that curves. Anybody else like to fix things? I'll let you borrow it. And I have a Leatherman engraved with my initials. So indeed, I have an issue with fixing things. I'll come back to this letting go in a bit, because apparently letting go is hard. For the moment, I'll move on to resistance. This is the third circle of practicing mysticism. Resistance is not just about like action and fighting. I think one of the ways that letting go interlocks with resistance is that it, in a way, is spiritual preparation for not being gripped. You know, resistance can look two ways. It can look like a fight, and it can look like empowerment. It can look like against, or it can look like with, okay? So the first stage of resistance is to resist that which does not speak to love and justice. Cornel West, who wrote the book Race Matters, is known for his saying, justice is what love looks like in public. A just love goes beyond personal feeling. It's not about whether I like you or not. It's about my belief that you have the right to exist because of exactly who you are, and fighting for that, not fighting against that. Resistance is an active force that guides our actions toward the sacred other, toward one another. A just love goes further than just individual acts of kindness. Again, it's more than nice. But I held the door open for someone I don't like today. It's more than that. It's believing in that person's right to enter the door. Resistance works consciously to dismantle systemic injustices. The next step to resistance taps in. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development. They are conventional, pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. And in each stage, there's kind of two substages. And in post-conventional level of morality, we're willing to break the rules when the rule is unjust. We are, for the large part, a rule-following society. If someone told you that the consequence for being late to ordinary life was that you had to stand on your head in the corner for 3 minutes, most of us would do it. A few of us would say, why? I might. But we need to learn to question and resist the unjust rule. This comes back to letting go of the ego's need for individual freedom and security. When we follow the rule because it's just what the law says, we're tending to protect our own need for security. But as I said earlier, Texas is a state that prizes individual freedom. It is one of my most favorite parts of being a Texan, and I am a lifelong Texan. And it's also the thing that works to our detriment. Where it worked, I don't know if any of you remember seeing these images during Harvey, when folks who owned bass boats, they were like, screw this, people can't get here fast enough, we'll take our boats out and rescue people. And they did. One image I saw was of two guys with a bass boat with a Confederate flag hanging off the back of it. A Confederate flag is a symbol of many things. Taking in a Hispanic family. The optics of that are like, oh, whoa, what? But that's when humanity shows up. That's what it is when our independence can actually resist the rule that keeps us from helping one another. Our kind of we got this attitude served the collective well-being in that moment. But there are many rules in our state right now being floated that are unjust and based on personal belief rather than collective well-being. Half of our lawmakers left town last week because they are resisting voting on voting redistricting. It's an unjust law that's being floated. There are expectations that teachers need to report transgender students or undocumented students in classrooms. This is an unjust rule. Schools are supposed to be sanctuaries. We should question if certain books should be banned from libraries, whether a woman has the freedom and wisdom to govern her own body without the interference of a politician. Comedian Wanda Sykes, anyone? I love her. She is hilarious. She put it this way, and I couldn't get the video because she owns the video, and I would have had to pay something like $79 to just upload it for today. Sorry, I didn't. But she said, if you really want to protect the kids, ban assault weapons, not the books. She goes on to say, until a drag queen walks into a school and beats 8 kids to death with a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, I think you're focusing on the wrong stuff. Only she didn't say stuff. Moving on. We need to become Shambhala warriors. Joanna Macy, she is a mystic in her own right, a Buddhist. She writes that Shambhala warriors do not belong to a particular place, but to a geopolitical reality when the world's pain calls. To quote her, she says, the weapons of the Shambhala warriors are compassion and insight. You have to have compassion because it gives you the juice, the power, the passion to move. It means not to be afraid of the pain of the world. Then you can open to it, step forward and act. But the weapon of resistance by itself is not enough. It can burn you out, so you need the other. You need insight. You need insight into the radical interdependence of all phenomena. With that wisdom, you know that it is not a battle between the good guys and the bad guys, because the line between good and evil runs through the landscape of every human heart. With insight into our profound interrelatedness, the deepest ecology we know, you know that actions undertaken with pure intent have repercussions throughout the web of life, beyond what you can measure or discern. By itself, that insight may appear too cool, head knowledge, too conceptual to sustain you and keep you moving, so you need the heat of compassion. Together, these two can sustain us as agents of wholesome change. They are gifts for us to claim. I think of compassion like the fire and insight like the water. I'm a water sign, if that means anything to anyone. It only means a little bit to me, but I'm a water sign with everything else in my chart fire, so apparently I'm just like a walking ball of steam. But I think those two elements come together here, compassion and insight. What do we believe about the other, and what do we know in order to get us moving forward? So mysticism is a practice. It's an intention. It's a willingness to show up as our bright and bold and ordinary selves. Something I notice as I look at my notes, do any of you have words that you always misspell when you type? Mine is form and from. Everywhere I'm supposed to have from, I have form and vice versa. It's so weird. So if I misspoke, that's why. I did say I was coming back to letting go, because I'm still like this. Letting go is hard. So here's the epilogue. When being an ordinary mystic is hard. There are times, I think, when awe and letting go and resistance feel impossible. They will. It will feel impossible to do these things. What do we do then? If, like me, you ever get to a point where you cry out, I just can't. I am all out of energy and I don't know what's left to give. And you might wail and scream and try to catch your breath because that grief is too hard to hold. When all has slipped away and letting go feels like failure, and resistance feels futile because nothing's changing fast enough, you've got to let it out. One of my fantasies actually is to have like a giant public dumpster, like the size of this room, with an endless stack of those cheap IKEA plates, the white thin ones next to it, like literally just keep them flowing so people can just crash these plates into the dumpster. It's so satisfying, breaking a plate and hearing the crash, and if it's in the dumpster, nobody will get hurt. Nobody will get in the dumpster and cut themselves. It's like axe throwing, I guess, but like a public dumpster where you can come and just throw a plate as many as you need. Anybody in there with me? No? Okay. You don't have to get in. You just get to throw the plates. The crunch is so satisfying. I talk like I've done this before, but you've got to let it out. Because if you're tired, if you're that exhausted where I can't is the first word out of your mouth, what happens is it becomes resentment and anger, or it becomes depression. When you're doubled over, tired and in pain, but you somehow find yourself still breathing, this realization does set in that you can do it. You can survive it. Any of you who have are still right here. Yes, you're a little shattered and exhausted, but you're here. That may actually be the thing you need, this realization that you're not in control. And then a funny thing starts to happen. Surrender. Your belly kind of softens, and then the tiniest sliver of awe emerges. Not only are you in awe of the fact, notice what I'm doing here. We're surrendered. We're at our rope's end, but all trickles in because you're still here. For me, awe was like my youngest child taking me by the shoulders and saying, breathe, mommy. Breathe in, breathe out. Just breathe. My 14-year-old, just like I did for him all those years ago, when he hiccuped, cried until he fell asleep. Or maybe just last week when he didn't make the team. You realize that letting go means you don't have to go it alone, that you're held as much as you are holding. There's a Japanese philosophy called wabi-sabi. I don't think you can say that word without smiling a little bit. Wabi-sabi. I think that's what it's about. You say the word and it's supposed to make you feel something. But it finds beauty in imperfection, in impermanence, and in the natural cycle of growth and decay. Kintsugi pottery, which you see here, is an expression of wabi-sabi, in which broken pots are mended by filling the broken seams with gold in order to showcase the object's history, wounds and all. Mystical experiences are often associated with ecstasy and extraordinary joy. This was, when I read varieties of religious experiences, that's most of what William James wrote about. These extraordinarily joyful, transcendent experiences. I want to offer, though, that your inner mystic is also found in exhaustion. When you get to the place of brokenness, when you realize love is actually not enough to stave off the pain. When you realize time doesn't heal all wounds, and you're not in control. Then we enter the mystery of uncertainty, of being held rather than holding, when we surrender to living with the wounds rather than trying to hide them or patch them up too quickly. The mystical experience is just as much about finding oneself in the dark night at the end of your rope. And in that dark place, sometimes you might find yourself with the tiniest pinprick of light, like so small it's annoying because you can't actually see anything, but it's there. That feeling of aloneness where you convince yourself that no one's ever been exactly here and there's no possible way I can be understood. But when your eyes adjust and you look around, you might start to notice that there are other tiny pinpricks, again, annoyingly small. They might be coming towards you, kind of bobbling as they move. And in the dark, you see that the light begins to grow, that there are others out there saying, we don't know the way either, but we've been here before. Here, take my hand and follow me. Something miraculous starts to happen, and you get up and you face another day. I'm amazed that even in the midst of deep unknowing, there are still tiny moments of joy. The hawk and the mockingbird that y'all didn't get to hear were at it again this morning. I mean, just chattering away. A ladybug might alight on your knee. Yesterday, my best friend made me laugh. And here I am with all of you. Life is like this. Mysticism allows deep emotions like grief and despair to bubble up, just as much as it delights in ecstasy and joy. I guess it's kind of in the all of it, this human experience. I am in that moment right now. I am unmoored, I'm uncertain, I'm uneasy, I'm scared. My son is going through stuff that I don't have the answer for. I don't know what's on the other side. I wish I did. I wish I could tell you, here's what you can do. All I know is that there is another side. And the only direction is through. I only know that I'm still standing, and like Jacob, I may have been forced to let go of the angel. And like Jacob, I might walk with a limp for the rest of my life. But I'm at a place in life where I have enough behind me that I have been through to know that I can survive this, and hopefully enough ahead of me to know that this wisdom may serve. Letting go is not about rolling over and passively accepting whatever comes. I don't want to leave you with that. It is about surrender. It's about staying committed to the process rather than gripping to a specific outcome, maybe more like chokeholding a specific outcome. But it's sometimes about getting up and doing the next right thing. It's about saying help. After 9/11, Bessel van der Kolk did some processing with preschool children whose classroom was so close to the towers that they could see the buildings fall and the bodies in them fall to the ground. He asked the kids as a part of the process to draw what they saw. And one kid drew this picture. And van der Kolk notices that there's this little dark circle at the bottom, and he asks what that is. This kid drew buildings with trampolines all around the base of the building, saying if only they had been there. I tell you this right now because given the moment I'm in personally, and that many of us might feel collectively as a country, we're placing the trampolines needed for the inevitable difficulties that arise in the future. This learning are the trampolines that will help us in the future, that will help the next generation. This is what Shambhala warriors do. We anticipate pain, and we respond compassionately, all of you. I'll close with these words from someone many consider to be a mystic, poet Mary Oliver. To live in this world, you must be able to do 3 things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes, to let it go, to let it go. No matter where you go this week, no matter what you do, remember this: you carry precious cargo, so watch your step. Thanks for being here.